this video, I want to talk about one of the most potent techniques of transformation or of identity transformation that I've experienced in a while. I did another video where I talked about inner dialogue and its corollary with family constellation work. But suffice it to say that within our bodies, within our mental, emotional, physical body, which is given to us by both sides, our mother, our father, as an inherited biological family system, we have within us a series of dialogues that reverberate from our ancestry into the present time. Inclinations that have been reinforced in our time in childhood to interpret data, interpret sensory, and respond to sensory data in a variety of different ways. Now, this is fine when we have what would be called an optimal system. An optimal system would be rational, would be progressive, meaning iterative. It's always getting better, seizing opportunities, taking the most intelligent choices available to us, and building sustainable well-being. However, too often, I notice in myself a freezing, a tendency to hold on to the past, to hold on to family or familiar patterns, and not jump ahead, not take things to the next level. And what I find to be useful, and this is the technique, is first of all, I will notice. It's often a young age, maybe age 3, maybe age 4, an internal age that's in the body, where I just, for example, don't want to face the world. I feel like a shamed 3-year-old. And it's biological, it's in my body, right? And the question is how to respond, because it's hard to indefinitely bypass one's own body, right? When one's instinct and reflexes and attachment is to one family or familiar pattern that makes no sense, right? That doesn't, it's not an optimal response to daily life. You know, how to respond. And after some more long-form internal dialogue where using bullet points, right? So using bullet points, you start off with the voice that's in the body, right? So I feel small, I feel scared of being hit, I feel afraid, I feel unworthy. So these are kind of bullet points that are putting into language muscles and configuration that are in the body. And this is important to differentiate, because until something is spoken, you cannot witness it. And until you witness it, you are meshed or merged with it, right? In order to differentiate oneself from one's pattern, one's inherited pattern, one must be able to witness it. And in order to witness it, it must be put into words. And so step one is to speak in words. So it's difficult to do witnessing just in inner thought. And so you write it out, right? So I start an email, I compose it, and I'll the first bullet point, I will say the first thing that's there in that internal voice. I'll go to the next bullet point and say the next thing that's there and the next thing until I've captured the state, the feeling, the musculature, right? So those words are a good representation of the body memory that I'm carrying and predisposed to living out. Now, once I've got that down and can witness it, next is to indent, go to another layer of bulleting. So just indent one, and in my email, it'll go from a round to a square, for example, if you indent, and every time you indent, it just changes the symbol. And that's useful if you're doing a more complex dialogue, which I did when I was doing like 30-minute inner dialogues when I first was trying to take what I learned in family systems dynamic or dialogue writing and be able to do it when I wanted on demand at home, right? Because if you, internal family systems is a wonderful paradigm, but if you have to wait a week or 2 weeks for a therapist, or if you have to set up a family constellation with 10, 20 people, it's expensive, but it's also not very helpful if you're just falling into a state and freezing in that state, on a Tuesday afternoon, right? You have to respond today or tomorrow to something. Something comes up physiologically. It's difficult to deal with. It's not very useful that you've got something planned in weeks. It's also the case, I did a constellation therapy recently where the therapist said, let this integrate and settle and come back in 3 months. Well, I've been doing over, 8 or 9 of these little mini email constellations that have profoundly transformed and liberated my state, right? So that's powerful. If one can go from a frozen, captured state to a state that is free and expansive and, feels 300% more constructive and enjoyable, and to be able to do that in 5 minutes to an hour for free, on demand, 24/7, that's incredibly useful, right? And so after doing some of these longer things, which were more involved, going back and forth and writing out, what I'm finding is that now, just 5 minutes, I have a conversation with an employee. They want more money, but they don't want to do the things that I've asked them to do so that I could profitably pay them more money, right? I mean, so in a win-win relationship, wouldn't it be wonderful if, the people you work with could make more money and then you can pay them more money, and it's a win-win, as opposed to we're not going to study and learn anything and we want more money, which is a win-lose, right? So, but nonetheless, there's a body memory in there that isn't rational. Like, that's rational. Hey, I've been waiting for you to do these steps and I would love to pay you more money as soon as you do these things that are easy to do, right? But that's not how the body takes these things. I'm a bad person. I feel very young in this situation, etc. And so I'm finding that it can literally take 5 minutes to write out, here's how I feel, here's how old I am, here's the physiology, these are the thoughts, these are the feelings, this is the physiology. So that's kind of expressing and differentiating what is and creating the witness framework. Next is presence, right? Now, this would not have made sense to me maybe 10 years ago, before I had experienced MDMA or psilocybin mushrooms. Now, having spent the 100 hours of research and carefully looked at best practice and protocols in both of these substances and utilized them, I've had a number of experiences of opening up to the witness, the self, the loving presence that's outside of the identity, right? So let's call that the self. And that's also the nurturing, loving witness, right? So it is important to have met yourself, which is hard to put into words. So you have to have an experience before any of this makes sense. Because the, quote, witness that we tend to think is witnessing before we've met ourself tends to be the critical parent, right? So a part of us says something, and then there's a judgmental voice that isn't the self. It's a reaction. It's the internalized parent. It's the internalized bully, etc. The critical teacher, the critical parent, the bully, the self-hatred, etc., always has a reaction, right? You're too weak, that's dumb. We're not talking about that, right? And so the witness is a transcendent presence that can be there for the scared, traumatized little girl or little boy that's inside. But it can't be there until you've differentiated your identity by being able to be a witness. But then then I find that I can go into that self and just be there with that part that's expressed itself unconditionally present, joyfully present with that. Now, in that state, the frozen pattern shifts and opens up. Then there's movement again. Then the regression moves into the background. The progression, the awakening, moves into the foreground. And having experienced 2 times today, one took 10 minutes and one took 5 minutes, a movement from a very small, scared, hurt place where I didn't want to face anything. I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to feeling incredibly expansive, incredibly capable, joyful, interested in life. I think that this technique is amongst the most potent, the most relevant of any technique that I've experienced to date. If you try this and it works, it doesn't work, etc., write about it. What does work, what doesn't work, where you get stuck. Maybe other people who find a way through. Like if you don't find a way through, maybe other people respond to comments that have suggestions that have worked for them. Or maybe you find a way through and you detail something, because the psyche is so iterative and creative, right? There's 1,000 different ways to do something like this. And everyone's going to do it a little bit different. And all that matters is the love, the transformation that is possible, that is probable, as we can find our own unique recipe in this territory.